I watched my 9-year-old daughter Emma fall 200 feet from the Jefferson Bridge into the black water below. Miguel Santos, head of the Sinaloa Cartel's Los Angeles operation, was laughing as her small body disappeared into the darkness. He thought he was sending a message to the neighborhood about what happens when you don't pay protection money. What he didn't know was that he just declared war on a Navy SEAL sniper who spent 15 years making cartel leaders disappear across 3 continents. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. My wife Rachel was screaming so loud I could barely understand the words. "Emma's gone," she kept repeating. "They took Emma." I was 3 blocks away, driving home from my job as a construction foreman, the cover identity I'd maintained for 6 years since retiring from Naval Special Warfare Group. By the time I reached the bridge, police cars had already surrounded the area with their lights painting the night sky red and blue. Rachel was on her knees at the bridge railing, staring down at the water where our daughter had disappeared. I pulled her into my arms as Detective Marcus Williams approached with the careful walk of someone delivering news that would destroy a family. "Mr. Connor, I'm so sorry, but witnesses say your daughter was thrown from this bridge approximately 20 minutes ago by members of the Santos Cartel. We have search and rescue in the water now, but at this height and with the current, the chances of survival are very slim." I didn't respond because speaking would have required acknowledging that Emma was gone, and I wasn't ready to accept that reality yet. Instead, I studied the bridge railing, noting the scuff marks where Emma's shoes had scraped against the concrete as she fought. My daughter hadn't gone quietly, she'd fought her killers right up until the moment they threw her over. "What did the witnesses see exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice steady through years of training that taught me how to function when emotions threatened to overwhelm tactical thinking. Detective Williams pulled out his notepad and read from witness statements. Multiple witnesses reported seeing 3 Hispanic males in their 20s force a young girl matching Emma's description out of a black SUV. One witness heard them shouting about protection money and sending messages. Another witness heard the name Santos mentioned specifically. "The men threw your daughter over the railing and drove away eastbound on Jefferson Boulevard." Rachel collapsed against me, her body shaking with sobs that came from somewhere so deep I could feel them in my own chest. But I wasn't crying yet because crying meant accepting that my little girl who loved drawing horses and wanted to be a veterinarian was really gone. Instead, I was cataloging details the way I'd been trained to do during 15 years of operations across Mexico, Colombia, and Central America. Miguel Santos, I knew that name from intelligence briefings back when I was hunting cartel leadership for SEAL Team 3. Over the next 3 hours, search and rescue teams combed the river while Rachel and I waited in Detective Williams's car. Other parents from Emma's school started arriving, bringing food and offering prayers that felt hollow because God hadn't stopped 3 grown men from throwing a 9-year-old girl off a bridge. At 2:30 a.m., a diver surfaced and spoke quietly with the lead rescue coordinator. I watched their body language and knew what was coming before Detective Williams walked back to our car. "Mr. and Mrs. Connor, I'm very sorry to inform you that we've recovered your daughter's body approximately half a mile downstream." Rachel's scream echoed across the river, raw and primal and completely broken. I held her while she cried, but something cold was settling in my chest, something I hadn't felt since my last deployment to Juarez 6 years ago. The operator was waking up, and Miguel Santos had no idea what he'd just unleashed on his organization. The funeral was held 4 days later at St. Mary's Catholic Church, the same place where we'd celebrated Emma's first communion 2 years earlier. The casket was closed because the fall and the water had damaged her small body too severely for viewing. Rachel sat beside me in the front pew, heavily sedated because she hadn't stopped crying since the night Emma died. I sat dry-eyed and silent, receiving condolences from neighbors and co-workers who thought I was in shock. They were wrong, I wasn't in shock, I was planning. After the service, Detective Williams pulled me aside with the uncomfortable expression of a cop who knew he was about to deliver bad news. "Mr. Connor, I need to be honest with you about the investigation. Miguel Santos operates with significant protection from corrupt officials. We know he ordered your daughter's murder, but getting evidence that will hold up in court is going to be extremely difficult." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm telling you this because I don't want you to get your hopes up about justice being served through the legal system." I met his eyes and let him see past the construction foreman facade for just a second. "Detective Williams, I appreciate your honesty. Don't worry about the legal system, I'll handle this my own way." He stepped back slightly, recognizing something in my expression that probably reminded him of men he'd seen in combat zones. "Mr. Connor, I strongly advise you not to take matters into your own hands. These cartel members are extremely dangerous and well-connected." "I'm dangerous too, Detective." They just don't know it yet. That night, after Rachel finally fell asleep from exhaustion and medication, I went down to our basement and moved the water heater away from the wall. Behind it was a small safe that Rachel thought contained important documents and some emergency cash. She was half right. The weapons cache included my old M40A5 sniper rifle, a Sig Sauer P226 with suppressor, tactical gear I'd kept from my SEAL days, and an encrypted satellite phone I hadn't powered on in 6 years. When I turned on the phone, it took 3 tries to connect to the military network, but eventually it rang through to a number I'd memorized 15 years ago. The voice that answered was exactly the same despite the years that had passed. "Well, I'll be damned, Jake Connor. Heard you were living the civilian dream in Los Angeles. Commander, I need to call in some favors." The silence on the other end stretched for 5 seconds before Commander David Harper spoke again. "This is about your daughter, isn't it? They killed her, sir, threw her off a bridge like she was nothing. Miguel Santos, Sinaloa Cartel, operates out of East LA with protection from half the city officials." Harper's voice went flat and professional, the tone I remembered from pre-mission briefings. "What do you need?" "Everything you have on Santos and his operation. Safe houses, lieutenants, operational patterns, who he pays off, where his family lives, weaknesses I can exploit. I'm going to dismantle his entire organization piece by piece until there's nothing left but a memory and a warning to every other cartel boss in California." Jesus Christ, Jake, you're talking about waging a one-man war against one of the most powerful drug cartels in North America. I stared at the photo of Emma on my workbench, her gap-toothed smile frozen in a moment before monsters taught her that the world wasn't safe. "Commander, I've spent 15 years doing exactly this kind of work for the government. The only difference now is that it's personal and I don't have to follow rules of engagement anymore." "Give me 24 hours, Harper said. "I'll have a complete intelligence package on Santos and his operation. But Jake, once you start down this path, there's no coming back. You'll either win completely or die trying. I already died, Commander, the night they threw my daughter off that bridge. Now I'm just making sure Santos joins me." The line went dead and I sat in the basement surrounded by weapons I'd hoped never to use again. Tomorrow I'd go back to being Jake Connor, grieving father and construction foreman. But tonight I was Ghost, the call sign I'd earned during 87 confirmed kills across Central and South America. And Miguel Santos was about to learn why cartel leaders used to whisper that name like a curse. The intelligence package arrived 18 hours later via encrypted email to a disposable laptop I'd purchased with cash. Commander Harper had delivered as promised, a complete breakdown of Santos's operation including addresses of safe houses, names and photos of his lieutenants, financial records showing which officials were on his payroll, even the location of his wife and 3 children who lived in a protected compound in San Diego. But the most valuable intelligence was Santos's psychological profile, compiled from years of DEA and CIA surveillance. Miguel Santos was a third-generation cartel member who'd taken over the Los Angeles operation after his father was killed in a rival cartel war. He ruled through fear and spectacle, making examples of anyone who challenged his authority. The murder of children wasn't unusual for him, it was a deliberate tactic designed to terrorize entire neighborhoods into compliance. He had 47 confirmed kills personally, not counting the hundreds of deaths he'd ordered as head of operations. But his weakness was arrogance. He genuinely believed himself untouchable because of his political connections and the firepower his organization commanded. I spent 3 days conducting surveillance on Santos's operations from a distance, noting patterns and identifying vulnerabilities. His main headquarters was a nightclub called El Paraíso on Cesar Chavez Avenue, protected by armed guards and sophisticated security systems. He had 6 lieutenants who handled different aspects of the operation: drugs, weapons, human trafficking, money laundering, enforcement, and political corruption. Each lieutenant operated semi-independently, which created natural friction points I could exploit. On the 4th night after Emma's funeral, I made my first move. Carlos Martinez was Santos's enforcement lieutenant, the man who personally selected victims for the cartel's message killings. According to my intelligence, he'd been the one who gave the order to throw Emma off the bridge. He lived in a modest house in Boyle Heights, deliberately low profile to avoid attention from law enforcement. At 2 a.m., when human alertness naturally drops and even trained guards make mistakes, I approached his house from the back alley. The security was professional but predictable: 2 guards rotating shifts, cameras covering the front and sides but not the back corner where trees created a blind spot. I'd been infiltrating defended positions for 15 years, and Carlos's house was amateur hour compared to cartel compounds I'd hit in Colombia. Within minutes, I was inside his bedroom where he slept alone because his wife had left him 2 years earlier after discovering his real occupation. I woke him by pressing the suppressed pistol against his forehead hard enough to leave a mark. Carlos's eyes went wide with terror as he recognized the kind of professional operation he was facing. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the father of Emma Connor, the 9-year-old girl you threw off Jefferson Bridge last week." His face went even wider because he'd probably killed so many people that individual victims blurred together, but a Navy SEAL appearing in his bedroom made it very personal very quickly. "Look man, that wasn't personal, that was business." Her old man owed Santos protection money and wouldn't pay. "Business," I repeated, pressing the pistol harder against his skull. "My daughter's murder was business to you." Carlos started to respond but I cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about Santos's operation, every safe house, every lieutenant, every corrupt official on his payroll, every weakness I can exploit. And if you lie to me or hold anything back, what happens to you will make Emma's death look merciful by comparison." What happened next took 47 minutes. I won't describe all the details, but pain has a way of making people extremely cooperative. Carlos told me everything: the location of Santos's main drug warehouse, which LAPD officers were on the cartel payroll, how Santos communicated with his lieutenants, even the combination to the safe in his nightclub office. When I was finished gathering intelligence, I left Carlos alive but changed. He'd spend the rest of his life with a very clear message carved into his chest, one down, and a phone number to call if he ever wanted to testify against Santos. By sunrise, I'd uploaded all of Carlos's information to a secure server and sent encrypted copies to the FBI, DA, and the Los Angeles Times. The media would have a field day with evidence of widespread cartel corruption, and federal agencies would be forced to act. But more importantly, Santos would know that someone professional was hunting him, someone who could penetrate his security and turn his own lieutenants into intelligence sources. Paranoia would start spreading through his organization like cancer. The next target was Santos's money operation. According to Carlos's intel, the cartel laundered approximately $3 million per week through a chain of car washes and check-cashing businesses owned by Santos's financial lieutenant, a man named Eduardo Torres. Torres was smarter than Carlos, former accountant who'd gone to prison for embezzlement and emerged with connections to Mexican cartels. He operated from a fortified office building downtown, surrounded by security and careful to never touch drugs or weapons directly. But Torres had one weakness that was exploitable. Every Tuesday afternoon he visited his mistress in an apartment in Santa Monica, always alone because he didn't want his security team reporting back to Santos about his extramarital activities. I followed him for 2 weeks establishing his pattern, then made my move on a rainy Tuesday when visibility was poor and street cameras would be obscured. Torres never made it to his mistress's apartment that day. Instead, he spent 3 hours in an abandoned warehouse learning that accountants break much easier than enforcers when properly motivated. The intelligence Torres provided was even more valuable than Carlos's information. He gave me complete financial records showing exactly how Santos's money moved through the system, which banks were complicit, which politicians received payments, how much each corrupt official was worth. But the most damaging information was evidence that Santos had been skimming from his own cartel, stealing approximately $500,000 per month from his bosses in Sinaloa and hiding it in offshore accounts. That kind of betrayal would get Santos killed by his own people if it ever reached Mexico. I sent the financial records to the same distribution list as before, FBI, DA, and media outlets, but I also sent a carefully edited version to Santos's superiors in Sinaloa through encrypted cartel communication channels I'd learned to access during my SEAL days. Within hours, Santos would be fighting wars on multiple fronts: federal investigations, media scrutiny, and internal cartel politics. His empire was starting to crumble exactly as I'd planned. The third lieutenant was Miguel's brother Javier Santos, who handled weapons trafficking and had a personal reputation for brutality that exceeded even Miguel's. According to my intelligence, Javier had been present at the bridge the night Emma died, possibly even one of the men who'd physically thrown her over the railing. He operated from a fortified compound in the industrial district, too well defended for a direct assault but vulnerable in other ways. Javier had a 15-year-old son named David who attended a private school in Pasadena, protected by bodyguards but following a predictable schedule. I didn't touch David Santos because I don't make war on children regardless of what their fathers have done. But I did let Javier know that I could have taken his son at any time, that his security was meaningless against someone with my training. I left a photo of David walking into school on Javier's car dashboard with a note: "Your son is safe because I'm better than you, but if anything happens to any other children in this city, he becomes fair game." The psychological impact was devastating. Javier pulled David out of school and moved him to a secure location in Mexico within 24 hours. But the real purpose of targeting Javier wasn't to threaten his son, it was to force him to make defensive moves that would reveal additional safe houses and operational patterns. I'd planted GPS trackers on 5 of his vehicles, and when he moved David to Mexico, he led me straight to a previously unknown cartel compound just south of the border. That information went straight to DEA and Mexican federal police, who raided the compound and seized $12 million in drugs and weapons. Javier's reputation within the cartel was destroyed, and Miguel lost his most trusted enforcer. By the end of week 3, Santos's organization was hemorrhaging resources and personnel. 4 of his 6 lieutenants were either in custody, cooperating with authorities, or dead from internal cartel politics triggered by my intelligence leaks. His political protection was evaporating as corrupt officials scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Federal agencies had frozen $40 million in cartel assets. And most importantly, Santos's bosses in Sinaloa were demanding answers about the missing money and the military-style operation that was destroying their Los Angeles franchise. But I still hadn't achieved my primary objective, making Miguel Santos pay personally for Emma's death. That required a face-to-face confrontation where he would understand exactly why his empire was burning and who had lit the match. I needed him to know that Emma Connor wasn't just another victim. She was the daughter of someone who'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of destroying organizations like his. The final confrontation would happen on my terms, not his. The opportunity came when Santos called an emergency meeting at his nightclub El Paraíso. According to surveillance I'd been running, he was gathering his remaining loyal soldiers to plan a counterattack against whoever was hunting his organization. He'd increased security to 20 armed guards, installed new surveillance systems, and was operating with the kind of paranoia that comes from watching your empire crumble around you. But paranoia only works if you know what to be paranoid about, and Santos still thought he was fighting a rival cartel or a federal task force. He had no idea he was facing a single father with nothing left to lose. I didn't try to infiltrate the nightclub because that would have been suicide against 20 armed guards in a fortified position. Instead, I used the skills that had made me the most effective sniper in SEAL Team 3 history. At 11 p.m., I was positioned on a rooftop 800 yards from El Paraíso with my M40A5 rifle, the same weapon I'd used for 87 confirmed kills across 3 continents. The distance was well within my capability. I'd made shots twice that far in worse conditions. Through my scope, I could see Santos standing in his office on the nightclub's 2nd floor, surrounded by his remaining lieutenants and gesturing angrily about the attacks on his organization. He looked smaller than I'd expected for someone who'd caused so much pain, just a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who'd built his power on the suffering of innocent people. I centered the crosshairs on his chest, controlled my breathing the way I'd done thousands of times in training in combat, and prepared to take the shot that would end this war. But then something stopped me. Not hesitation or mercy, but the realization that killing Santos from 800 yards would be too quick, too clean, too easy for what he'd done to Emma. He needed to know why he was dying, needed to understand that his death was direct consequence of throwing a 9-year-old girl off a bridge. A sniper bullet would rob me of the moment when Santos finally understood that actions have consequences that can't be bought off or intimidated away. I packed up my rifle and made a phone call to Detective Williams on a burner phone. "Detective, this is Emma Connor's father. I have information about Miguel Santos's location and evidence of multiple crimes being planned right now at El Paraíso nightclub on Cesar Chavez. You need to raid that location immediately." "Mr. Connor, how do you have this information? Are you conducting your own investigation?" "Just trust me, detective. If you raid El Paraíso in the next 30 minutes, you'll catch Santos red-handed with enough evidence to put him away forever. And detective, make sure there are news cameras present. Santos's arrest needs to be public." The raid happened exactly as I'd arranged. LAPD, SWAT, FBI, and DA descended on El Paraíso with overwhelming force, catching Santos and his remaining lieutenants in the middle of their meeting. News helicopters captured footage of Santos being dragged out in handcuffs while evidence teams seized computers, financial records, and enough incriminating material to guarantee federal prosecution. But I wasn't finished with Miguel Santos yet, because prison was too comfortable for someone who'd murdered my daughter. Over the next 6 months, I systematically destroyed everything Santos had built. His wife divorced him and took his children to Mexico where he'd never see them again. His cartel bosses in Sinaloa, informed of his embezzlement through my intelligence leaks, put a $2 million bounty on his head that would follow him into whatever prison he ended up in. The corrupt officials who'd protected him were either under federal investigation or had fled the country. And most satisfying of all, the neighborhood where Emma had lived was finally free from cartel intimidation for the first time in 15 years. The trial was a media spectacle that lasted 8 weeks. Federal prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of Santos's crimes, including testimony from Carlos Martinez and Eduardo Torres, who'd both taken plea deals in exchange for cooperation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on 47 counts including murder, racketeering, drug trafficking, and ordering the death of Emma Connor. The judge sentenced Santos to life in federal prison without possibility of parole, but added something that made my 6-month campaign worthwhile. "Mr. Santos," the judge said from the bench, "you built an empire on fear and violence, believing yourself untouchable because of your money and political connections. But one man, acting alone to avenge his daughter, dismantled everything you created and exposed the corruption that protected you. Your life sentence is not just punishment for your crimes, it's a warning to every other criminal who thinks innocent children are acceptable targets. Some fathers will burn your entire world to ashes if you hurt their families." After the sentencing, Rachel and I stood at Emma's grave for the first time since I'd started hunting Santos. The headstone read, "Emma Marie Connor, beloved daughter, gone but never forgotten." Rachel had spent the past 6 months in therapy, slowly rebuilding herself from the devastation of losing our daughter. She'd known I was doing something to bring Santos to justice, but I'd kept the details vague to protect her from legal liability. Now, with Santos in prison and his organization destroyed, we could finally begin to heal. "Did you get them?" Rachel asked quietly. "Everyone who hurt Emma. Everyone who was involved, they're either dead, in prison, or fled the country. Santos will spend the rest of his life in a supermax facility where cartel enemies will make every day a nightmare." She nodded slowly, staring at Emma's grave. "Does it help? Does revenge make the pain less?" I thought about that question honestly. It doesn't bring Emma back. Nothing can do that. But it means she didn't die for nothing. Every child in this city is safer because Santos's organization doesn't exist anymore. 2 years after Emma's death, I was working on a construction site when my encrypted phone rang with a call from Commander Harper. "Jake, we have a situation in San Diego. New cartel leadership trying to fill the vacuum Santos left. They're targeting families again, using children as leverage. The FBI requested someone with your specific skill set to consult on the operation." I looked at the photo of Emma I kept in my wallet, her gap-toothed smile reminding me why some battles are worth fighting even when they cost everything. "Commander, I'm retired. I have a wife who's finally healing and a life I'm trying to rebuild." "I understand," Harper said. "But there are 5 families in San Diego right now living in fear because these cartel members think children are acceptable weapons. Those families need someone who understands that conventional law enforcement isn't always enough. They need Ghost." I thought about Emma falling from that bridge, about the 3 men who'd thrown her over like she was nothing, about Rachel's screams that night. Then I thought about 5 families in San Diego who were about to lose their children the same way unless someone stopped it. "Tell me where and when," I said. "Ghost is coming out of retirement." 6 months later, the San Diego cartel operation was dismantled through a combination of federal prosecution and strategic elimination of key leadership. No children were harmed, and 3 families testified about how an anonymous tip had saved their lives. The media called it a successful federal task force operation, but Commander Harper and I knew the truth. Sometimes justice requires people willing to operate outside normal boundaries, willing to sacrifice their own peace for the safety of innocents. 10 years after Emma's death, I stood at her grave with Rachel and our adopted daughter Sophia, a 7-year-old girl we'd rescued from a cartel human trafficking operation during one of my consulting missions. Emma would have been 19 now, probably in college studying veterinary medicine like she'd always dreamed. The pain of losing her never went away, but it had transformed from a raw wound into a scar that reminded me why I did the work I did. Miguel Santos died in prison 3 years ago, killed by members of a rival cartel who'd never forgiven him for the weakness that allowed Ghost to destroy his empire. I didn't celebrate his death because that would have required caring about him as a person rather than seeing him as a problem I'd solved years earlier. The neighborhood where Emma had lived was completely transformed. Children played in parks that used to be cartel territory. Families sat on their porches without fear. Small businesses thrived without paying protection money. And on the wall of the community center was a memorial to Emma Connor and the dozens of other children who died before someone finally stopped the cycle of violence. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of justice and redemption. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from around the world. And let me know what kind of stories you want to hear next, more military revenge, family betrayal, or something else entirely. Until next time, remember that evil only wins when good people choose to do nothing, and sometimes justice requires people willing to pay the price that others won't.